August 25th, 2014. Michael Brown is laid to rest by his family and friends. He was 18 and unarmed when gunned down by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. An autopsy showed he was hit at least 6 times, twice in the head. His body lay on the street for over 4 hours. His death unleashed an anger that had been building for decades at a system the community here says is stacked against them from birth, and raised questions about policing and about race in America.
Everything that's happening in Ferguson is everything that's wrong with police-community relationships, particularly when it comes to black men.
One of the reasons that young black men were so angry about this, because they all see themselves as Michael Brown. It could have been them.
That anger would continue for months to come. But while the legal process ran its course, a community held back, watching and waiting for justice to be done. Fault Lines was there during that time. In this special extended episode, we look deeper into why so many here feel such injustice from those sworn to protect them.
Sit down for Michael Brown! Sit down for Michael Brown! Sit down for Michael Brown!
When Fault Lines first arrived in Ferguson, just days after the shooting, we were shocked at what we found. A small crowd of peaceful demonstrators, faced with a police force that looked ready for war.
This is an extraordinary display of force, to be honest. I mean, these guys are armed to the teeth. So do you know why they're bringing this equipment in?
You all need to move back some, okay?
Do you know why they're bringing in armored vehicles?
We are from here! Why can't go home? Why can't go home?
We're not out here to start trouble. Please don't harass us. Don't do that in our faces.
It wasn't hard to understand why the police response would be viewed as inflammatory.
You don't think that's provoking? They provoking. They asked them to move out the street. Do you see any violence occurring right now? It's peaceful. They don't have to be here.
Has it been like this the last few days?
It's been like this for years. For years.
This kind of policing?
Yes. It's been like this for years. From birth.
You can no longer be in the area. It is no longer a peaceful protest. You are not peacefully assembling. You must leave to be subject to arrest.
It's funny, right? It's funny, right?
They make us inhuman.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Listen, they break us down. They try to strip us of every right as a human. We're supposed to be innocent. We're always guilty until we are innocent.
That night quickly spiraled into what would be a turning point of the Ferguson story.
It seems like they're throwing flash bombs now. There's explosions going off. We're not quite sure what the police are firing, but there's gas coming down to them. We're going to get out of here.
In a matter of hours, the streets went from peaceful protest and calls for justice to scenes out of a conflict zone. As the military-style vehicles advanced, rubber bullets were fired. Anyone on the streets, including media, was viewed as a target. These scenes would flash across news networks that night.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Now!
By the next morning, the nation was paying attention. After a call from President Obama, Missouri's governor showed up in Ferguson, putting the state highway patrol in charge of the response, relieving local police of their command.
Governor, how would you explain the nature of the presence that we saw on the streets yesterday? I mean, there were armored personnel carriers, about 100 police in military-style uniform, high-powered rifles being trained on the crowd. I mean, who is in charge of making those decisions, and are they going to be held to account for mistakes that you clearly think have been made?
No, I think that that was yesterday, tonight's tonight, tomorrow's tomorrow.
But in a move that caused renewed anger on the street, Ferguson's police chief released this video the very next morning. It showed Brown stealing from a grocery store. His grieving family was incensed. The motives and timing of releasing the video were immediately questioned.
Did he know that he was a suspect in a case, or did he not know?
I'm going to read you a statement here. Michael Brown's family is beyond outraged at the devious way the police chief has chosen to disseminate piecemeal information in a manner intended to assassinate the character of their son. What's your response to that?
We have given you everything that we have now and everything that we can give you. So that's from our police department. You have everything we've got. There's nothing else that I can give you.
Chief Jackson, the timing of the release of this video.
And by that night, news of the video's release had spread.
Stand up for what they believe in.
It was the police response that made national news. But the wider, underlying story we began to hear was about an anger that had started long before Mike Brown.
The city has got these black people down. Ferguson, I get harassed on the daily. It's a f***ed up law system, and it's harassment that go on every day for people, including myself, including a lot of these black males. When you feel like a target, how the f*** you gonna react? And that's the real.
The shooting of Mike Brown sparked something in Ferguson. Why did it happen here? On the surface, the city looks like any quiet American suburb. But in the southeast corner of the city limits, there are densely populated apartment complexes. This is where Michael Brown lived, and this street is where he was walking the day he was killed.
What exactly happened on the day that he encountered Darren Wilson here remains unknown, but what's clear is that they were two people from two very different worlds.
This area has a high concentration of poverty, and residents say it's heavily patrolled by the police. It's predominantly African American, and it's typical of the way many places in the St. Louis area are divided along racial and economic lines. A divide that young men like Mike Brown say means almost constant interaction with police.
You got hit with a bullet?
No, I got hit with a rubber bullet, man. Look.
On what night?
Look.
You got hit with those?
Yeah.
Which day was that?
What was the first day?
Monday. The first day was Monday.
Solomon, Ronald, and Miller are all from northern St. Louis County and have been out protesting the Michael Brown shooting. But it wasn't just about Michael Brown, they told us. They were angry at something more profound than that.
They just harass you, they treat you like you don't belong over there.
Who do? The police?
The police. Yeah, we got 2 strikes, and that's black and male. That's our 2 strikes. So all we gotta do is miss a blinker, and we stretched out in the middle of the street.
That's what people say? Yeah. 2 strikes?
You make a face at a cop. Strike 3, you're out. You're going to jail for something. Hey, which way I turn, bro?
What these young men were talking about is more than just a perception of unfair treatment from police.
They have no connection to them culturally other than as police officers patrolling that area and enforcing the law.
Adolphus Pruitt is head of the local NAACP chapter, which filed a federal civil rights complaint in late 2013 against the St. Louis County Police for disproportionately targeting blacks.
What's going on here? A young black kid can live in an urban area, and when he leaves his house and he's going for a walk, or he's going to work, or he's going to school, he's subject to be stopped by police, he's subject to be questioned, he's subject to have to produce identification, he's subject to be ran through the system and see if he has any outstanding warrants, and then after all of that, then he's told, okay, you can go ahead. And in some cases, it happened for no reason at all.
Like I said,
even if they avoid the police, these young men have other odds stacked against them. The unemployment rate for African Americans in this county is 3 times that of whites. Among black males aged 16 to 24, the unemployment rate here in the last few years has reached nearly 50%.
Coming back to losing hope, what do we have to bank on after school? I went to college, got my medical assistant. I wanted to be in the medical field. They found out I had a felony. Guess what happened? I spent $20,000 for nothing. I get my hands dirty working on cars now.
How does that make you feel?
Like a bag of shit. What I'm supposed to do?
Does it make you angry?
Hell yeah.
St. Louis is probably one of the most segregated communities in the country, both racially and socioeconomically. As African Americans move in, whites move out. And what happens also with that is some of the highest paying jobs, some of the best of living conditions go with them.
It's hard, like 11. Walking to that quick trip is a mission at night.
So you have somebody that can't find a job, you have somebody that's been marginalized in society, and then 3-4 times a week you get hassled by the police? I mean, come on, how much can a young person stand who doesn't necessarily have the tools to deal with this stuff? And sometimes it just comes out pretty raw. That has to do with some systemic racial issues that need to be resolved.
Really? That's the same one that they burned down?
What people here told us is that police shootings like Michael Brown's are the most violent examples of a system of law enforcement that unfairly targets black people. African Americans in the St. Louis area are disproportionately stopped and searched by police on a regular basis. Many of those ticketed come from low-income backgrounds. They can end up in court for minor offenses, leading to a spiral of debt that is sometimes difficult to escape.
Brake lights are $100. Driving while suspended is $200. The insurance is $100. You got $100 on each of the failure to appears, $10 on the seatbelt. See the clerk at the window.
It is almost always the case that the judge and the prosecutor and the police are white and the defendants are black. Almost always, not every time, almost always. Police officers.
Thomas Harvey is a local St. Louis lawyer. He says some municipalities get more than 30% of their revenue from fines that target mainly lower-income residents.
So it looks like you have a payment due this evening. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's correct. I came in to ask if I can get an extended.
They're facing, daily choices regarding their poverty that it makes sense not to pay to get the car registered because you're trying to keep your light bill on. And then if that's your choice, it's always going to make more sense to pay your light bill and feed your kids and pay your rent before you go get the vehicle registered. I would call it a daily, low-level harassment by your government. So psychologically, I think it's a devastating effect.
I gotta strategize before I come out the house every day. I gotta figure out what not to do to draw the police attention, especially living in Spanish Lake, because I get stopped just walking to go get my kids from school. So I gotta figure out which route should I take. It's less police.
Solomon himself has become stuck in a cycle of tickets and fines that he can't get out of.
My kids still gotta go to the doctors. They still got doctor's appointments. Still gotta go to the grocery store. So yeah, I drive illegal. Every day.
Illegal how? What do you mean?
No license. Because Ferguson wanted $3,200 to get it back from a 15-year-old speeding ticket. How am I supposed to pay that back? When won't nobody hire me? I can't pay that back.
For Solomon, as for many in this community, Mike Brown was a symbol of an entire system that's unfairly tilted against black communities.
In a white neighborhood, cop catch a kid stealing in the store, probably gonna take him to mom and dad. That's it. Take him to mom and dad's house. We don't get those chances. We get shot down. It's different. The laws are different. This world not for us. America anyway. It ain't for us.
By late August, a grand jury convened by the St. Louis County prosecutor began deliberations on whether to indict Darren Wilson, the officer who shot Mike Brown. The Department of Justice and the FBI also launched federal investigations into the shooting and the practices of Ferguson's police department. But while officials promised the community that justice would be done, we began hearing stories about other police shootings in the area. Shootings where the case never went before a grand jury and where the officers involved were exonerated. Shootings that had barely even made the news.
Who wrote that there?
Probably one of Kerry's friends.
In April 2013, St. Louis police tried to pull over 25-year-old Kerry Ball Jr. for a traffic violation. Kerry, who was carrying an illegal weapon, fled the scene first in his car and then by foot. Two officers chased him in pursuit.
Right.
And at that point, he had a gun in his hand, and the police say that he was pointing it at them.
The police say, yeah. Allegedly, that's what they say.
And the witnesses have a different story.
The witnesses say that the gun was on the ground, He dropped the gun and he turned around and his hands were in the air.
It wasn't like how the police want to try to explain it. Points the gun, bang, 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 bang. It wasn't a bang, bang thing. It was just stop, threw the gun, hands up, then he was shot.
Carey never fired a shot, and the lawyers told us none of the 10 witnesses questioned say Carey pointed a gun at the officers. Carey was struck at least 21 times. The family's lawyers say ballistic evidence suggests the police kept shooting as they stood over him.
Look at this. See that spot there?
Yeah.
There it is right there.
Yeah.
So just come on back.
This one as well, right?
Yep.
That's that one here.
Yeah, you need that one down there.
This is from where the officers' weapons were pointing...
Straight down, through.
So that went through Carey's body. The St. Louis Police Department cleared the officers of any wrongdoing. An FBI review agreed with their findings. We requested comment from the police regarding Carey's case, but received no response. In the wake of Mike Brown, Carlos and his family are hoping for an independent investigation. The police would say you can still pose a threat if you're on the ground. It doesn't matter if you're down. You can still kill a police officer.
Okay, so he's down. You got 4 shots in him now. Is he still a threat? Okay, shoot him 4 or 5 more times. That's 8. Is he still a threat? Shoot him 4 or 5 more times after that. That's 12. Is he still a threat? So now you're deliberating now. See, now you got time to think about what you're doing. After about 4 or 5 shots, caught up in the moment, but the continuing onslaught of the shots mean you're thinking now. You got time to think, you got time to deliberate, you got time to stand down.
This picture right here was from Carey's last birthday. That was at his 25th birthday. And this was down at the party that they had that evening.
Who's this?
That's my mom.
Which one's Carey?
That's my little brother Kevin, and that's Carey.
This is him?
Yep.
Carey was an honors student at a local community college, 1 year from graduation.
Photograph, huh?
Right.
Were you close?
Very close. He was my best friend. We just a year apart. We almost did like everything together. It was more to Carey than what, the media want to say, just because he had. Can't judge people just because he has a record. On the news, they showed it that one day and then, boom, it went away. 25-year-old male pointed a gun at officer, shot and killed. Now it's sports. It's like anything that black males do is punishable by death. Put them down. We're not treated fairly, I don't believe, by the police, period.
For over 3 months, Fault Lines has requested to speak to the St. Louis City Police, the St. Louis County Police, and the Ferguson Police Departments. They all declined. But police in another local municipality called Hazelwood did agree to take us out on patrol. This is Nick Lawrence. He's been a police officer for 13 years. He says in a situation where police feel in danger, there is little time to deliberate.
It's the adrenaline dump. It's the tunnel vision. It's the loss of fine motor skills.
We asked Nick about something many in the community have been questioning since Mike Brown's death: the readiness of police to use deadly force. He tells us their training actually calls for it.
We're trained to shoot center mass to stop the threat. So if you are a...
Center mass?
Center mass, and the center mass of the body. So basically the chest. Does that make sense? When the threat is stopped, then you can go back to preserving life. But if your life is in danger, you're not expected to worry about the person who's trying to put your life in danger. You're not worried about his well-being until he is no longer a threat.
Okay, your report number, please.
Suddenly, Nick spots something down the street.
One to see it is 3963.
It's a traffic stop. It was the sort of minor violation we'd been hearing people complain about.
He hasn't registered his vehicle, so
okay,
we'll see what that is. You know what that's in?
Yep.
Hey, you got a truck plate on your Charger here. This is nice, by the way. Yeah. What's up? Haven't had a chance to get it registered yet, or did you just get it? Or?
Yeah, I just got it.
Okay.
The driver also happened to be black.
Okay.
In 2013, over half of Hazelwood's stops were African-American drivers. while they only make up around 30% of the city's population. In the end, Nick didn't give the man a ticket. It wasn't clear whether or not our presence had anything to do with it.
Get your plates fixed, okay?
Yes, sir. I appreciate y'all a lot, man.
Bro, thanks. Thanks, Rainey. You're fine.
Nick said he never saw if the driver was black, and that race plays no role in who he pulls over. When we pointed to data about racial disparities in traffic stops, Nick disagreed that blacks are specifically targeted.
Is the reason minorities are getting arrested at a higher rate because of their socioeconomic status? Is it because of the school systems that they're in? There's got to be another reason other than just because the cops are bad. That the statistics are like you say, that they're off. I mean, I understand that. I'm just saying, what is the reason behind that? Is it and to just basically say, oh, because all the cops are racist? Well, we're all smarter than that, aren't we?
Hazelwood Police Department hasn't had any fatal officer-related shootings. But last summer, 2 Hazelwood officers stopped a man named Antonio Johnson by the side of the road.
Sir, I'm not asking you to sit down. I'm giving you an order. You sit down now. All right. Sit down, or I'm going to sit you down, okay? Hey, what are you, about 6'10"? Get your hands behind your back. Get it behind your back. Get it behind your back.
Johnson was arrested for driving while intoxicated after parking his vehicle. According to the police report, he was, quote, aggressive and resisting arrest.
Put your hands behind your back. Quit fighting me. Put your hands behind your back.
But at this point, Antonio must have
his handcuffed.
His hands in cuffs, right?
The police report says Antonio was trying to, quote, step out of his handcuffs. He was tased a total of 13 times and hit repeatedly with a baton. The police had to call medical responders, or EMS, to the scene.
His condition was so poor, in fact, that the EMS officer said to the arresting officers, can you please remove his handcuffs? We can't treat him if you've got these handcuffs on him. They said, no, we're not going to take them off. So they asked again, please take the handcuffs off. Again, they said no. They said they had never had a situation before where the police officers refused to remove the handcuffs. They said the condition that he was in, he wasn't aggressive, he wasn't fighting.
2 days later, Antonio died in the hospital. When we asked Hazelwood Police about the incident, they told us there was an investigation by the St. Louis County Police, and the case was referred to the FBI.
Do it now. Put your hands behind your back. This is easy.
The officers were cleared of any wrongdoing. Antonio's mother and family are suing the Hazelwood Police Department.
Do you think that he might have been in a situation where he was resisting arrest? Or
no.
What makes you say that? What makes
Because
you...
I know Antonio. Antonio would sit there, he would let them police talk all the stuff they want to talk. And how can he be resisting arrest when you got handcuffs on him?
While we were at Antonio's mother's house, several family members showed up who'd been in the hospital room when he died.
This man should have seen his kids grow up, their kids come. He should be playing with his grandkids right now. Right. Somewhere with his wife, not where he's at right now today. It was no reason for that to happen. None whatsoever. And I'll never get that image out of my eyes of him laying in a hospital bed. There's nothing you can do. There's no amount of money you can give to this family that will bring that man back. Nothing. And it hurts.
In Mike Brown's case, only just opening cases for the rest of the brothers' cases just got swept under the rug, like my cousin's case.
And he's not, Mike Brown is not our family, but I hurt for that family too because we understand their pain. To me, it's not color. I wouldn't wish this on another black man, white man, Chinese, nobody. Nobody deserves this. Right. We're all humans. Color shouldn't matter.
And everybody seems to know somebody that has encountered this kind of thing. Right. Everyone you talk to around here.
Yeah.
It's not just isolated cases. Right. Everyone knows somebody that's been killed by the police.
Every year since 2009, I lost a family member from the police.
From the police.
In 2009, my uncle was killed on the south side by the police. 2011, my big brother was killed by the police. 2013, my father was killed by the police. Like every family that's I lost it be because of the police. And don't no officer be punished for it. No officer.
Right.
And like with the situation with Mike Brown, like a lot of other people got into that. These officers, they kill people and still be out here as an officer, and they can kill somebody else, and they know they gonna get away with it because nobody ain't gonna do nothing about it.
After spending several weeks in this part of Missouri, we were starting to realize how common it was for people in the black community to have lost family members to police. In fact, one night, it happened while we were out filming.
We've just heard there's been another officer-involved shooting just this evening in a neighborhood just very close to here. So we're heading down to the scene right now. We've heard there's a crowd gathering and that a teenager has been shot and killed by the police.
By the time we arrived, the St. Louis Police Department had already been tweeting out their version of events. The official police story, released just hours after the shooting, said the victim was not just carrying a gun, but he'd fired 3 times at an officer who shot him down in self-defense.
Do you know what happened?
The story's still sketchy, but they saying 16 shots, kids shot 16 times.
By the police?
Yeah.
It's definitely an officer-involved shooting?
I'm hearing off-duty officer that was a security guard.
Do you know who it was?
It was a police officer. They already took him out.
They arrested him?
No, they didn't arrest the cop. They put him in the backseat and he left.
From what people were telling us, an off-duty officer had stopped local resident Von Derek Myers, nicknamed Droop by his friends, after he came out of this store. It was unclear why he was stopped. They insisted he wasn't doing anything wrong.
They don't even have no reason why they pursued the young man. They can't say nothing was stolen. He came from this store and walked there. Now they sitting over there, they whispering each other, making up stories. They gonna tell the police officer. But that's all right, because St. Louis gonna burn the fuck down. Darryl Wilson and him, no, all y'all. All of y'all. We just can't take it.
With police officers standing guard, detectives began to leave with the evidence. But anger amongst the crowd was growing.
I am Droop. I am Michael Brown.
Hands up. Don't shoot.
Hands up.
Don't shoot.
Hands up. Fight back. Fight back. Shoot back. Fight back. Fight back. Fight back. Fight back. Fight back. Fight back.
Suddenly, they advanced, telling police to leave the scene.
You can see the anger of the crowd. They're pushing the police back now. Some of the police vehicles have already left, and people are really riled up here. The tensions are extremely high on the streets.
The visceral anger of those first few days after the shooting of Michael Brown seemed close at hand once again. Outraged at the police killing of another young black teenager, some in the crowd lost control. It was a night where the gulf of trust between these officers and the community they police, so badly exposed by the killing of Michael Brown, came crashing back into focus once again. The police department and the city have promised a thorough review of the case. But the community here says they are tired of waiting for answers and that little is changing.
Shoot, motherfucker! Shoot now! Shoot now! Shoot now, motherfucker! You bad? You bad? You bad? All you want to crack is in your face, talking that real.
How do you feel as a man? No respect, no accountability. Who do you protect? Who do you serve?
Who do you protect? Who do you protect? Who do you protect?
In the African American community, even the young kids see the police. Oh, here come the police. White people don't say that. Oh, I'm glad to see the officer. Black people in many instances are not. And white people will say, oh, that's because they've done something wrong. No, it's not. It's because of the culture and the climate that people have grown up in that caused them to fear that.
Most people can understand it intellectually, but there is a visceral nature to the interaction that really kind of goes down to the core of who we are as people. That's hard to understand unless you've experienced it.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! We are high crowd! We are high crowd! We are high crowd!
And it's a phenomenon that extends well outside of St. Louis. In mid-October, thousands descended on Ferguson to bring attention to the number of African Americans being killed by police on a national level. In the last 6 months, there has been Eric Garner, Kajami Powell, John Crawford, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Darian Hunt, and Ezel Ford. That's just this year. Many more names fill the mouths of protesters here on the streets. Sean Bell, Oscar Grant, Rakia Boyd, Ayanna Stanley Jones.
This is the new civil rights movement that's happening right now, and the ground zero is policing of black communities. There's no question about it. People are drawing connections that we drew 50 years ago in the civil rights movement, that this is a societal problem. This is not just a police department problem, and it's not just a county problem, and it's not just a sheriff problem. This is a societal problem because it happens all over the country. It happens constantly.
A recent ProPublica investigation found that a black male teenager is 21 times more likely to be shot by police than a white male teenager.
Why everybody look like me gotta be a criminal? There's no honor in that badge.
You don't have to be a criminal to be black, but if you are black, a lot of people think you are more likely to be a criminal. And if you live in a community full of black people, very often the police department would say, I'm not going to treat this as a community full of individuals. Some of them are good or some of them are bad, but they set up their policies to think of black communities as sort of a hotbed of hiding for criminals.
There is no comprehensive federal data on police officer shootings in the US, let alone the race of the victims. According to the FBI, there are about 400 justifiable police homicides every year, but this number is drastically low. Only a fraction of some 18,000 police agencies report their data, because there is no requirement to do so. But even if data did exist on a national level, it would still be rare for a police officer to be charged in even the most controversial cases.
They don't just have a presumption of innocence, they have a super presumption of innocence. And they have that because I think it's hard for people to believe the men and women we hire to protect us would then go out and harm us.
Laurie Levinson was a federal prosecutor for 8 years. She says laws in place actually give police officers significant latitude.
The other thing is we allow them to carry weapons. We have the sliding scale of use of force, so there's a lot of deference to when they decide to use the weapons. They're in dangerous situations that are fast evolving. We are loath to second guess them, and the legal standards are very high for convicting a police officer. So even if you charge them, it's not so easy to convict them.
But there's also another major factor on if and how police are held to account: prosecutors.
There's an inherent problem with local prosecutors going after, quote, one of their own, one of their local law enforcement, because these are the people they work with all the time. And in the back of their mind, they're thinking two things. One, I know these guys. By and large, they're good guys. Second, if I go after them too aggressively, what's going to happen to my cases in the future?
So there's a very close relationship in a day-to-day thing. Then what happens if the police department person, the police officer, becomes the defendant? The question that we have to ask is that same relationship going to impede a fair and honest assessment of whether that police officer did something wrong? So leaving apart the platitudes of the politicians that say, oh, it's completely fair and impartial, we know that a lot of times it is not fair and impartial.
We wanted to see how that relationship might play out in the Michael Brown case. In the past 10 years, records show there were 49 officer-related shootings in St. Louis County, 14 of them fatal. Among all of those cases, not one led to an officer indictment. The man who holds that power, Bob McCullough, St. Louis County's prosecutor for almost 24 years. He comes from a family of police, his father killed in the line of duty by a black man. All factors that many say make McCullough too close to those in uniform. One of the most controversial cases under his time has been what became known as the Jack-in-the-Box case. In 2000, two unarmed black men, Earl Murray and Ronald Beasley, were fatally shot at least 20 times during a drug bust. The officers who opened fire said they felt threatened when the men's car moved towards them. McCullough took the case to a grand jury.
He refused for months to release key details, such as the names of the police officers who did the shooting and the number of shots fired. He called the two dead men bums, He refused all but the most cursory contact with the African American community, which was understandably upset by the police shooting of 2 African Americans.
Michael Sorkin is a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch newspaper. After the grand jury decided not to indict the officers, Sorkin managed to get hold of secret testimony of witnesses in the case.
We found out for the first time what actually happened in the grand jury.
According to Sorkin, McCulloch maintained that all of the detectives at the Jack in the Box that night had testified the car moved towards the officers.
What you heard on those tapes was different.
Only 3 of the 13 detectives testified that the car had gone forward. 2 of the 3 were the shooters.
As Sorkin reported, McCulloch failed to question the discrepancy in the officers' stories and never admitted misrepresenting the truth.
There's a general distrust, rightly or wrongly, of this prosecutor. And that has not changed since then, and it continues to this day.
Behind closed doors, the latest grand jury called by Bob McCulloch, the one for the killing of Michael Brown, dragged on for months. Demands for the prosecutor to recuse himself had been dismissed. There were 70 hours of witness testimony, hundreds of pages of notes. Former prosecutors were bewildered by the proceedings.
That's not how we do it, and you know that's not how we do it. Any other time, it would not be happening like this. If he really wanted to indict Darren Wilson, he could get him indicted. It's just a probable cause hearing. It's not a trial. If he isn't.
Gerald Christmas has dealt with numerous grand juries in the St. Louis area. He says the threshold is so low that an overwhelming majority of grand jury cases ends with an indictment.
And the key factor is this. Ask all around this country, how often do prosecutors bring the defendant in to testify? We don't care what the defendant got to say. We're the prosecutor's office. We know that we have a case. That's the reason why we're going for an indictment, so we can move forward to trial. We don't need the defense version at this point.
Darren Wilson testified for 4 hours in September. The final straw, Christmas said, for anyone with concerns over the impartiality of the prosecutor.
I'm saying that you are too close to the police to think that you're going to aggressively prosecute them. And especially in a situation like this where it's such a close call, I'd be more comfortable with just an independent party who doesn't have all these same affiliations.
Late November, and all of St. Louis was on edge, waiting for the grand jury's decision. Anonymous leaks from the proceedings began to emerge, showing Darren Wilson's version of events increasingly corroborated by witness testimony.
Indict, convict, send that killer cop to jail.
The community grew apprehensive. Missouri's governor had preemptively declared a state of emergency, activating hundreds of National Guard. Finally, on November the 24th, word came that the grand jury had finally reached a decision. McCulloch himself would deliver the announcement. We'd made repeated attempts to speak to McCulloch about the process. Now, we were about to get the entire picture all at once.
The news conference is taking place inside this building, and we're told it's going to start imminently, and the grand jury will be giving its decision.
Media access was extremely limited. 1 camera and only a dozen or so reporters were allowed in. Outside, tension filled the air. A divided community held its breath. Protesters who'd been mobilizing for months wished for a step towards justice. Supporters of Darren Wilson hoped for an end to months of uncertainty. This was the moment that would be etched into history.
Arriving at their collective decision. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
No indictment.
Physical and scientific evidence examined by the grand jury, combined with the witness statements supported and substantiated by that visit,
No indictment.
tells the accurate and tragic story of what happened. A very general synopsis of the testimony and physical evidence presented to the grand jury.
on their face. It's an absolute insult. The whole state should have egg on its face. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
Just a week later, in New York, a grand jury would return with the same decision for the officer who killed Eric Garner in a chokehold. No indictments, no wrongdoing. The question of Darren Wilson's fate had been answered, but a much more fundamental question remained. What changes? What does everything that's happened in Ferguson mean for preventing another Mike Brown? For these communities, at least for now, the message that was sent was one of little hope.